Last night, the president asked a question about the sexual assault allegation against Brett Kavanaugh, a question that he knows the answer to.
To see what's going on is just very, very sad. You say, why didn't somebody call the FBI 36 years ago?
Donald Trump knows why. Confessed sexual assaulters like Donald Trump know the answer to that question. That's why people like Donald Trump repeatedly sexually assault women, as he is accused of doing throughout his entire adulthood, and as he boasted about on that Access Hollywood video when he describes his preferred methods of sexual assault. There are now hundreds of thousands of answers to Donald Trump's question on Twitter under the hashtag #WhyIDidn'tReport. Sexual assaulters know why women don't report. That is what sexual assaulters are counting on, that they will never be reported. And I hope that I'm just one of millions of men who spent a couple of hours today reading those answers. Thousands of them contain an identical line, word for word. No one would believe me. It keeps recurring as a haunting refrain as you read why I didn't report. Angela Ward said I was 17 and he was my best friend and told me no one would believe me. He had more friends than I did and his parents knew mine and I thought I would be blamed. Why I didn't report. Daryl Hannah said I did. It didn't matter. I was dismissed, disparaged, and I still get blamed. Why I didn't report. Paisley Flowers said, the first time I was 8 years old, the second time I was 12, both times I was frozen with fear. I didn't tell anyone for fear no one would believe me. I was a little girl and I was terrified. I still haven't told. I still freeze up when I think about it. Why I didn't report. Amy Vanderpool said, I was humiliated. I knew everyone would find out. I was afraid it would ruin my professional reputation before I had even started. I was afraid they would not believe me and let him hold my grade back. I was afraid they would not let me graduate from law school. Why I didn't report. Chrissy said, why I didn't report? Because I was a new private in the Army, deployed overseas, and I didn't know anyone. I trusted him because he was my NCO. Everyone loved him. He could do no wrong. No one would have believed me. Cindy McFarland said, at 13, I was given a list of questions that would be asked if I reported. Most were accusatory. No traumatized 13-year-old is going to agree to that. When I tried to report a few years later, the question was, do you have proof? Why I didn't report. Jessica Verhaven said, the first thing I wanted to do after being raped was take a shower and shower again and again and again to get the feeling of being violated off of me. With support from friends, I did attempt to report it, and I was told that there was no proof because I showered. Why I didn't report. Christina Reynolds of Emily's List added an important footnote when reading these stories. She said, the why I didn't report tweets are powerful, but please understand that those are only coming from people comfortable about talking about what happened to them in some way. There are many people who are still silent. This represents just a portion of the problem we face as a society. Maureen Shaw said, I was only 15 and scared nobody would believe me. Or worse, would blame me. I was scared he would do it again if I told anyone. It was and still is humiliating to recount such profoundly sexual, violent details. I didn't want to break my parents' hearts. Why I didn't report. And so parents of daughters have a big job to do. Don't ever let your daughters feel that they can break your hearts by telling you the truth. And parents of sons have a much more important job to do. Stop the violence. Do not let your sons grow up to be the guy that did that to Maureen Shaw or to anyone else. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.